Greetings from our channel again. Tierney required $4.2 million to support her crippled daughter, and her father admitted to stealing it from her in 1958. However, the terrible secrets didn't end there. These missing letters revealed the heartbreaking reality about everything from John F. Kennedy's brutal rejection to working secretly at a clothes shop between mental breakdowns. Beneath the prettiest facade in Hollywood. On November 19, 1920, Tierney was born in Brooklyn, New York. Her family had a lot of money. Her mother, Belle Lavinia Taylor, was a former physical education teacher, and her father, Howard Sherwood Tierney, was a prosperous insurance broker. Jean had an affluent childhood, going to the best schools and living a life of affluence. She enrolled in Brilliantman International School in Switzerland when she was just 15 years old. There, she picked up French, which would help her in her acting career. 2 years later, in 1938, she went back to the United States and enrolled in Miss Porter's Connecticut School, which was well known for teaching girls from wealthy families. Jean made her major society debut at a posh function at the Fairfield Country Club the same year. She donned an outfit that was modeled after Bette Davis's in the film Jezebel. For Jean, this ceremony marked the beginning of something very different, her journey into acting, while for many other females it was a step toward marriage. But things weren't always ideal at home. Jean's father's insurance company suffered a severe litigation in the summer of 1938. The family's lovely home in Connecticut had to be sold. Her father organized a cross-country road trip to California to lift everyone's spirits. Everything changed because of this vacation. On August 14, 1938, Jean was recognized by renowned director Anatole Litvak while she was at Warner Brothers Studios. She was so beautiful that he persuaded her parents that she ought to be photographed. He even set up a screen test for her the following day. Jean surprised everyone by reading lines from his film, The Sisters. Her father rejected a $125 per week contract offer from Warner Brothers, claiming there wasn't enough cash. Jean didn't give up even though that might have been the end of her Hollywood hopes. By arguing that Broadway was a more respectable career choice for someone of her social status, she persuaded her father to let her attempt it instead. Jean began pursuing her passion after making her society debut in September 1938. She started contacting Broadway producers after enrolling in acting classes at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. She debuted on Broadway in the comedy What a Life on December 26, 1938. She played a little part. Critics noticed her even though she was carrying a pail of water on stage. She was even referred to as the most stunning water carrier I have ever laid eyes on. She got a major role in the play The Male Animal in early 1940, which was her big break. It gained popular after opening in March. The head of 20th Century Fox, Darryl F. Zanuck, once saw Jean on stage. He decided she had to be in Hollywood because he was so fascinated. Jean agreed to a 7-year contract with Fox on April 2, 1940, which paid $250 per week. Her father agreed to the arrangement since it allowed her to return to Broadway for one show a year. The Shanghai Gesture, released in 1941, was Jean's first significant Hollywood appearance. Jean portrayed Poppy, a young lady enticed into Shanghai's gambling world, in this bold and gloomy film. The film stood out because it was daring for its day and addressed weighty subjects like vice and addiction. Joseph von Sternberg, the director, was harsh with Jean, requiring 27 takes for a single, poignant sequence. Notwithstanding the difficulties, Jean received positive reviews for her performance, and the movie was a hit, hitting the box office with more than $1 million. Jean stood out in Hollywood thanks to this performance, which demonstrated her ability to handle complex, nuanced characters. When Jean starred in Heaven Can Wait in 1943, her career took off. She portrayed Martha Van Cleve, a character that grows from a young woman to an elderly grandmother, in a comedy. For scenes where she needed to appear significantly older, this necessitated hours of makeup application each day. Costumes and camera angles were carefully designed to conceal Jean's 4-month pregnancy throughout filming. The film was a great blockbuster when it debuted in August 1943, grossing $5.3 million at the box office. Jean's performance was praised by critics, who ranked her among the top comedic actresses. She became a Hollywood star as a result of her achievements. Her weekly pay was increased to $3,000. And each month she got thousands of fan notes. Jean was one of the most well-known figures in Hollywood by the end of 1943. Her major break came in 1944 when she starred in Otto Preminger's noir thriller Laura. She portrayed Laura Hunt, a character in the film who captivated everyone with her beauty and mystique. On the 11th of October 1944, Laura came out. Audiences adored it, despite initial skepticism from critics. In the United States, the film earned more than $2 million. Tierney gave an eerie performance, and the role was eternally linked to her gorgeous appearance. Azadia Newman's painting of Laura was one of the film's most memorable elements. Because of its fame, this portrait sold for $477,000 in 2005. The success of the film continued after that. Jean reprised her role as Laura in the 1945 radio adaptation. She became even more famous after millions of people listened. Laura has been hailed as one of the best movies ever created over the years. Its significance to Hollywood history was demonstrated in 1999 when it was added to the U.S. National Film Registry. Another significant role was in 1945's Leave Her to Heaven. Jean portrayed Ellen Barrett this time, a stunning but extremely envious lady. The picture was 20th Century Fox's most successful release of the decade, grossing nearly $5.5 million. In one of the most startling sequences, Ellen watched helplessly as her husband's crippled brother drowned. It took 3 exhausting, sweltering days to film this scene in Bass Lake, California. Jean had to shield her eyes from the water's glare by donning sunglasses. She was nominated for an Oscar for Best Actress for her terrifying portrayal, but she lost. Nevertheless, it became a classic, and in 2018 the Library of Congress protected it. Renowned filmmaker Martin Scorsese subsequently referred to it as one of his favorite movies and claimed that Jean Tierney's acting abilities were underappreciated. She starred in a number of Otto Preminger films, including Where the Sidewalk Ends, 1950, and Whirlpool, 1949, as well as Ernst Lubitsch's Heaven Can Wait, 1943. Jean once argued with the gruff director Lubitsch while they were filming, but they eventually came to respect one another. In contrast, Preminger helped her improve as an actress. He showed her how to convey strong feelings without going overboard, which brought out the best in her performances. She then claimed that Preminger taught her that, in terms of acting, less is more. Another reason people couldn't forget her was her attractiveness. The head of 20th Century Fox, Darryl F. Zanuck, referred to her as the most beautiful woman in film history. Her signature features were her high cheekbones and stunning emerald eyes. Her appearance served as the inspiration for the film's well-known song, Laura, as well as artists such as Salvador Dali. Years later, the portrait Dali created of her in Venus' Dream brought $2.1 million. In addition to hardships that permanently altered Jean Tierney, her life was full with beauty, love, and heartache. Their love tale was straight out of a movie when she first met Oleg Cassini. He was 28 and she was barely 20. Despite the disapproval of her parents, they quickly fell in love. Jean didn't care that they believed he was only wanting her money. She had fallen deeply in love. They surprised everyone by rushing to Las Vegas to tie the knot in June 1941. Jean wore her earrings since they didn't even have wedding rings. They used fictitious identities on their marriage certificate because they wanted to keep it a secret. Her father became enraged and severed her financial ties. To make matters worse, Oleg was fired from Paramount. However, they continued to enjoy each other's company in their early years. Even as life began to test them in unexpected ways, they remained youthful, glamorous, and in love. When Jean and Oleg's first daughter, Daria, was born in 1943, their lives were irrevocably altered. Jean had visited the Hollywood canteen during her pregnancy and had unintentionally contracted German measles. She had traveled there to aid the troops. However, this one night had tragic results. Daria was little and ill at birth. She was only 3 pounds, and her survival depended on a blood transfusion right away. Doctors soon delivered heartbreaking news to Jean and Oleg. The rubella left Daria profoundly intellectually handicapped, partially blind, and deaf. Jean was devastated. She held herself responsible for the incident and was unable to shake the feeling that she was to blame for her daughter's pain. Despite spending a great deal of money, they were unable to assist Daria. Daria was admitted to an institution at the age of 4 due to the difficulty of her care. This was the right decision for Daria, but it devastated Jean and plagued her for the rest of her life. Jean learned the precise cause of Daria's disability 3 years later, in 1946. She was approached by a fan who was eager to see her favorite actress at a tennis party. The woman nonchalantly acknowledged that she had breached quarantine for German measles in order to meet her after telling Jean how she had met her at the Hollywood canteen during the war. Jean stopped. Her daughter's disabilities were the result of this woman's self-centered choice. Jean remained silent. She was so shocked and angry that she just walked away. She would never forget this moment. enhancing her already existing feelings of despair and shame. It was cruelly ironic. She liked her celebrity, but it had also hurt her the most. Jean's entire life was impacted by her guilt about Daria. She kept hating herself for going to the canteen in Hollywood while she was pregnant. It was a continual burden on her mind. Her mental state began to deteriorate by the late 1940s. She developed anxiety and depression, frequently alternating between intense melancholy and vigor. Her work also suffered. She experienced a breakdown on the set of Magambo in 1953 and was forced to abandon the film. Jean's marriage to Oleg Cassini suffered as a result of her difficulties. Their relationship was damaged by the strain of taking care of Daria, the financial strain, and Jean's deteriorating health. They split up in 1946. And Oleg donated his portion of their estate to assist cover Daria's medical expenses. Despite dating other people while they were apart, they got back together in 1948 and even had a second daughter, Christina. Although things appeared to improve for a while, their issues never truly went away. Their marriage ended in divorce in 1952. Oleg subsequently claimed that Jean was the unluckiest girl in the world, and they remained friends even after their split. Jean Tierney's life took an exciting turn in 1946 when she met John F. Kennedy. Jean was already well known in Hollywood at the age of 26. Kennedy had just beginning his political career and was 3 years older. They fell in love right away after meeting on the set of her film Dragonwyck. People in Hollywood and Washington were captivated by their glitzy combination, and their romance became a phenomenon. They spent time together in upscale dining establishments and nightclubs in Boston and New York, on film shoots, and at political gatherings. They were photographed at the Razor's Edge premiere on August 12, 1946, and the image went on to become famous. Even when they were away, Kennedy and Jean remained close. He encouraged her to learn about his world by sending her books on politics and economics. Kennedy revealed his desire to become president one day over a vacation in Cape Cod in October 1946. As their bond deepened, he invited Jean to his family's Hyannis Porthouse at the beginning of 1947. His mother, Rose Kennedy, liked her when she met his family. However, Jean also became aware of how difficult it may be to blend in with a political family while she was around the Kennedys. Jean became more and more involved in Kennedy's life as their time together increased. She even met prominent political personalities at one of his campaign events in March 1947, but their jobs were taking them in opposite paths. Their lives were difficult to balance because of Kennedy's political aspirations and Jean's Hollywood obligations. They both understood things couldn't work by June 1947. They broke up. However, it had a profound emotional effect on them both. For Jean, the split was painful. Kennedy told her the truth during a lunch in New York on June 17, 1947. He claimed that because she was divorced and he was Catholic, he could never wed her. He clarified that marrying her might destroy his political prospects. Jean was devastated. She had even pictured herself as First Lady in her dreams of a future with him. As though love had no role in his ambitions, Kennedy talked about his aspirations to become a congressman, senator, and finally president. He seemed to be discussing someone else's life, Jean wrote later. Jean experienced emotional difficulties after the split. She lost weight, struggled to fall asleep, and turned to work as a diversion. But the melancholy persisted. She also suffered a breakdown while filming Thunder in the East in September 1947. Her lengthy battle with her mental health began when she was forced to stay in the hospital. Jean was still receiving therapy for depression in 1960, when Kennedy was elected president. He graciously responded to her congratulatory telegram, but it served as a somber reminder of what may have been. Years later, Jean referred to Kennedy as the love of her life, but said that she learned that dreams don't always come true from their connection. Kennedy was not the end of Jean's love life. She had met Howard Hughes, the well-known millionaire with a reputation for being bold and outlandish, in 1940. He was in love with her and made extravagant attempts to win her over, such as dumping roses into her swimming pool and flying his plane low over her house. For years, they had an intermittent connection, even if it was difficult. Hughes was domineering and frequently vanished without warning. Nevertheless, he showed his enduring concern for Jean's welfare by funding her psychiatric care years later. Jean started dating Prince Ali Khan, a handsome playboy with an extravagant lifestyle, in 1952. He lavished her with costly presents, including a ring set with 10-carat diamonds, when they first met in Cannes. Although Ali's father, Aga Khan III, disapproved of their relationship and threatened to cut him off financially if he married her, their love story made headlines. Jean decided that their lives were too different to function together and broke the relationship after feeling overburdened by the pressure and returning to the United States. One of Hollywood's most stunning and gifted actresses, Jean Tierney's life took a tragic turn in the 1950s. Little adjustments were made first. She started experiencing mood swings and found it difficult to concentrate at work. She started acting strangely on stage and forgetting her lines in 1952. Then everything collapsed in 1953. She was working on the film Personal Affair on February 14 when she became disoriented and wandered the studio lot. She was unable to identify anyone or recall her purpose for being there. She was then admitted to the hospital and given a serious anxiety and depression diagnosis. Her career was significantly impacted by her troubles. She was chosen to star in John Ford's popular film Magambo in 1953. She would perform with well-known actors like Clark Gable and Ava Gardner, who would play Linda Nordley. Jean's mental health prevented her from taking advantage of what should have been a fantastic opportunity. She became quite anxious and was unable to cope with the pressure. She had an incident on set just before the start of the filming. She went into a frenzied state, yelling and losing her ability to recognize others around her. She had to be replaced by the director, and Grace Kelly did so. Kelly performed a fantastic job and was even honored with a Golden Globe. Later, Jean watched the film and was devastated. She was aware that her illness had robbed her of the opportunity to shine. When Jean began filming The Left Hand of God in 1955, she was having even more difficulties. Sometimes she didn't even seem to know where she was, and she had trouble remembering her lines. To assist her, the crew had to put cue cards throughout the set. She froze entirely one day when she was in a scene with Humphrey Bogart. Before Bogart gently escorted her off the set, she stood there, speechless and perplexed. He tried his best to assist her because he knew she was in pain. Bogart even visited the studio and insisted that Jean receive expert assistance. He worked with her to rehearse lines on set and looked for methods to help her. Off-set, he lined up a low-pressure meeting for her with a psychiatrist, posing as a casual meal. His generosity provided Jean with much-needed assistance. From 1953 to 1959, Jean Tierney endured 6 trying years in 3 separate mental facilities. She saw at least 12 doctors during this period. Her admission to the Harkness Pavilion in New York City in 1953 marked the beginning of it all. She was transferred shortly after and spent a considerable amount of time at the Institute of Living in Hartford, Connecticut. She also underwent one of the most excruciating treatments of her life at the Menninger Clinic in Kansas. She had her arms bound to her sides and was tightly wrapped in Chile, damp sheets as part of the cold pack therapy. She subsequently said she cried as the minutes passed slowly and that it felt like she was covered in snow. For her, this treatment felt like pure misery, even though it was meant to aid in recovery. Her career was significantly impacted by her mental health issues. She was forced to leave the film Magambo in 1953, and Grace Kelly took her place. She collaborated with Humphrey Bogart on The Left Hand of God in 1955, 2 years later. However, Bogart told the company she required medical care because her condition deteriorated so much while filming. Tierney frequently broke down in tears and had paranoia, believing that someone was attempting to poison her. She nevertheless insisted on seeing the movie through to the end, displaying amazing fortitude despite being in such a dire situation. Shock therapy, often known as electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT, was one of the most harmful treatments Tierney had. She underwent a startling 32 sessions over 6 years. She detailed how electric currents produced seizures and electrodes were applied to her temples in her book. According to her, this treatment was expected to be revolutionary, but at the time, doctors were not quite aware of its hazards. She experienced severe memory loss as a result of the therapy, making acting nearly impossible. Her memory issues were so severe that she had to abandon the project when she attempted to resume performing in 1959. She felt lost and disengaged in both her personal and professional lives as a result of her memory loss. Tierney's desperation reached a breaking point in December 1957. She attempted to flee while at the Institute of Living. She tried to scale down the structure by climbing out of a window on a chilly winter day. People perceived her as a desperate lady attempting to escape, rather than the glitzy Hollywood celebrity she once was. She was swiftly located on the property and taken back inside by the staff. Doctors then tightened security around her and modified her therapy. The escape attempt turned into a public controversy, with headlines highlighting the depth of her problems. Tierney talked candidly about her experience in mental hospitals later in life. She described the agonizing aspects of losing her independence and being treated as though she had no control over her life in her memoirs. She talked about feeling helpless while being restrained. She also talked about long days that appeared to go on forever, as well as times when she felt bored and alone. She used to be a Hollywood star, but now she lived in a world of strict routines and sterilized environments. Even throughout treatments like cold pack therapy and electroconvulsive therapy, she felt like a lab rat. When Jean Tierney met W. in 1958, her life took a significant change. An oil magnate from Texas named Howard Lee. Jean was battling mental illness and attempting to start over at the time. Actress Hedy Lamarr was Lee's previous spouse, and Lee was 21 years older. They happened to meet in Aspen, Colorado, where Jean had gone to recuperate from bipolar disorder treatments in a hospital. Lee, who was already worth over $100 million, fell in love with Jean right away. The headlines about her difficulties didn't concern him. Rather, he wanted to help her because he recognized her strength. Their love affair blossomed rapidly. They discussed life and healing, had elegant dinners, and flew in private jets. By supporting her choice to leave Hollywood and promoting her therapy, Lee provided her with the stability she had been seeking. He became into someone who genuinely cared about her welfare in addition to being her boyfriend. Jean and Lee were married in a small, private ceremony in Aspen in July 1960. It was simply family and close friends, nothing fancy. They moved into a large home in Houston's River Oaks district after the wedding. At the time, the enormous 5,000 square foot home was valued at more than $2 million. It turned into Jean's refuge. She could even view her past films in the private screening room. Jean adapted to her new life as a socialite in Houston. She worked with the Houston Grand Opera, participated in charitable activities, and joined the Mental Health Association. She wished to educate others about mental illness by drawing on her own experiences. Jean also took up painting as a pastime and liked to read the scripts for the local plays. She and Lee frequently traveled to their Florida vacation house, where she enjoyed working in her garden and taking long walks on the seashore. Jean spent more than 2 decades leading a peaceful and contented existence away from the bustle of Hollywood. She still liked performing even after Jean found peace. She made a few appearances on screen again in the 1960s. She had a little but significant role in the 1962 film Advise and Consent. Her performance was hailed by critics, claiming that her presence and beauty were unwavering. This boosted her self-esteem enough for her to play a complicated character in Toys in the Attic in 1963. She performed a glamorous character similar to those from her previous career in her final film, The Pleasure Seekers, released in 1964. She later tried her hand at television, making appearances in a miniseries in 1880 and a film in 1969. Hollywood, however, proved difficult for her, and she always prioritized her emotional well-being. These roles were her last farewell to performing as she decided to retire. Jean had a terrible connection with her father, Howard Tierney. She discovered in 1942 that he had embezzled more than $250,000, or almost $4.2 million in today's currency, from her wages. When she attempted to use her savings to take care of her daughter, Daria, she learned this. The funds had vanished, leaving her with less than $5,000. She severed her relationship with him because of this betrayal. Her father wrote her a letter in 1958, apologizing for his actions and pleading for her forgiveness. Jean kept the letter but never responded. She barely mentioned it in passing in her memoirs, stating that even the people closest to us can fail us in the most significant ways. She hardly talked about it, but it was a painful aspect of her life. During her recuperation in 1958, Jean made an unexpected move. She was an anonymous employee of a small Kansas clothes business. She worked 30 hours a week for $1.25 an hour under the name Mary Stevens. She felt liberated, but she also wrote in her diary that she was afraid someone may recognize her. She went about her regular routine for 4 months, assisting clients in selecting hats and dresses. Although no one guessed Jean's true identity, one coworker subsequently remarked that she appeared pleasant and elegant. Her tenure at the store came to an end when a client finally recognized her. Later, Jean claimed that those months helped her heal and find serenity. She frequently highlighted how performing routine, ordinary tasks had been crucial to her recuperation. Despite her many hardships, Jean Tierney occasionally found love, serenity, and meaning in her life. She persevered in the face of mental illness, treachery, and the demands of celebrity.